Before I get started with my response, I just wanted to give you a heads up that I've got some notes written down on my phone and I've got the prompts pulled up on my computer, so if my eyes are darting back and forth, that's just what I'm looking at, just for context. For this project, I have decided to respond and reflect on Zora Neale Hurston's How It Feels to Be Colored Me. Now, I have discussed Zora Neale Hurston in 2 past English classes, and I absolutely adore discussing her, reading her work, annotating her work, being able to digest all of it, because her identity and her emotions and her beliefs are very prevalent in everything she writes, but they're also not overpowering of the content, so that it's still digestible and relatable without feeling like you are just watching somebody else's life with no really interpersonal connection. So the first little sub question for this prompt is, what is your writer's identity? My writer's identity is just Zora Neale Hurston, and she makes that very prevalent throughout all of her writing. She talks about and discusses how she never, knew she was black, or how she never, thought of herself as less of a person because she was a woman. She does fall under 3 very large identification categories, such as being an African American, being a woman, and being from a poor class of very, low paid, minimum wage working peoples who usually didn't have, a top education, who didn't really do a lot of the wealthy hobbies and jobs that a lot of very affluent white people were able to do at the time. So she's a part of the big 3, I like to call them: your race, your gender, your class. She's a part of the big 3, and her 3 main identity pillars are massive, not even just today, but especially during her time when her writing became so prolific, and when she was able to graduate from Barnard, when she was able to do these amazing things despite her identification setbacks. However, they all make up her one big identity as just being Zora Neale Hurston. And it was a little hard to think about that when reading her biography and reading How It Feels to Be Colored Me, because I wanted so badly to just pick one identity and run with it. But I couldn't, because she doesn't discuss, specifically in this passage, in How It Feels to Be Colored Me, she hones in on her identity as an African American person. But she is more than that. She's also a woman in a time where women weren't allowed to do what they are now, and she was a part of a poorer class that didn't have the leg up in the world that, they're offered now through various programs and jobs and scholarships that just didn't exist back then. So it was hard to just pick one identity. But I guess for this assignment, I'll focus in on her identity as African American woman, because that's what she discusses in How It Feels to Be Colored Me. But her identity is Zora Neale Hurston, an African American person who pulled herself out of a lower class life. The second sub-question kind of goes with the first one, and it says, how do you see your writer's identity showing through their writing? In her writing, Zora Neale Hurston discusses how she never put it together that she was colored until she was older and left her hometown, because she discussed how her hometown was people exactly like her, all colored people of a lower economic status. She didn't realize that she was any different from anyone else until she left that community. This is heavily prevalent in 2 early lines, the first being sorry, I lost that. Oh. I remember the very day I became colored, and I was not Zora of Orange County anymore. I was now a little colored girl. She had never let her physical and economic identities define her before she left her town, and why would she? She was Zora, just Zora from Orange County. But now she was a category. She was a specific social archetype in other people's eyes. She was what people told her she had to be. She could no longer just be Zora Hurston of Orange County, Florida. She had to be a colored person, or she had to be a little colored girl. And this is, I mean, she blatantly does say those were her identity characteristics when she left her hometown. Like, it is blatantly clear in her writing that that is her identity as viewed by other people. But her identity is viewed by herself, you know, is explained in a much later line in her writing, and it says, I belong to no race nor time. She's not going to be called a little girl or an old woman, and she's not going to be characterized and classified by the color of her skin. She's just a person. She's just Zora Neale Hurston, someone trying to live her life to its best ability, best capacity, and she's not going to conform to what people tell her she should identify as or present herself as or quantify, qualify, categorize herself as. She's just going to be herself, and that is heavily prevalent not only in the writing from the module, but also in Their Eyes Were Watching God, when she puts her character Janie through a very similar path where Janie doesn't understand why being a girl has to set her back in her life goals, why being an African American woman has to set her back in all of her dreams and her hopes, and why she has to rely on the money of other people to do the things that she feels are possible in her life. I mean, this identity of really no identity is so clear in her writing from the module and her other writings that I've studied, and it's very refreshing to see that, because most of the passages in this module, you read it and they chose one identity and they clung on to it, and that's all the writing was about. But to me, Hurston's writing wasn't about her being one category. Her writing was about her being a person who was a mix of all of these identities that we so desperately cling on to and show off and wear as a badge, when we should really just be being ourselves without forcing ourselves and other people to go into categories. It's a lot of word vomit, but it's a complicated, beautiful mess of this is my identity, but my identity is just myself. And it's refreshing, and it was fun to look into and to look back on for this assignment. So the third kind of like smaller question was, how does your writer rise above his or her identity to create the art that appeals to everyone and not just people who identify with my writer? And Hurston writes stories that are meant for everyone, and she was even later criticized for it. Yes, most of her most popular works were fiction, but they did have some basis off of her own real life and some of the injustices of being African American and being a woman and being from a lower economic class and level. But she made her writing enjoyable and digestible for everybody, regardless of their race, their gender, their social station. She wanted everyone to be able to read and connect and understand with her writing. And in the biography portion of the reading from the module, she's described as being under fire by African American writers who felt she minimized the seriousness of racial prejudice. And I feel not that she tried to minimize it in a form of ignoring it or saying it wasn't as important as it was, because it is very important. Racial prejudice is a terrible thing that's still active today across the world, but she didn't minimize it to make it less important. She minimized it so that people didn't feel like she didn't want them to read her books and her writing and her thoughts. Zora Neale Hurston wanted everyone to be able to see and hear and feel what she put when she put pen to paper. She didn't want people to read the first paragraph and feel like they didn't belong in reading the text. She didn't want people to feel left out of her opinions or her beliefs or what she was trying to get across. I feel she was able to incorporate her identity to give the book a plot and characters and development and emotional connection, but she didn't showcase only one identity that made anyone who didn't fit exactly into that category feel like they shouldn't have been reading what she was writing. I mean, in the passage from the module, she discusses that yes, she was a colored woman, but it didn't make me feel like I shouldn't have been reading that. And it allowed me to connect to her writing in the sense that I've been put in categories because people have told me that I belong to that category, even when I just wanted to be myself. I didn't feel like I was reading somebody else's life and observing somebody else's life behind a piece of glass. I was in it, I was experiencing it, I was bonding with it. And I feel that that is how she's able to rise above her identity in order to create digestible art that has real connections in it, not just observations and applause behind it. The last question, and the most yet least complex one in my opinion, is how can identity become a positive force in art and in society beyond the negativity often associated with and stemming from identity politics? I had to rewatch the assignment video for this a couple times to really digest and understand what you were trying to convey. And to me, identity is what makes art art. If you take identity out of art, you're going to have the same blank canvas on every wall of your museum. It's going to have the same dimensions, the same shape, the same exact shade of white made of the same canvas material. Nothing will be art. Identity is what allows us to be individuals and have different opinions and believe that different things are beautiful and different things are ugly and different things are impressive and simple. I mean, if we take out identity, even if everyone was given the exact same picture to paint, everyone was given the exact same instructions, it's still going to come out differently because people are going to think that one brush will be better than another. People are going to think that a very hint of yellow more is going to make a flower pop than only using the standardized amount of yellow. But if you take that all away, you won't have art. You will just have a world of bland. And I can't even say beige because somebody's identity is that beige is the best color. It couldn't be white either. It would just be bland and lifeless. Identity is a key point in what makes people people. It is what makes me Josephine Yarbrough. It is what makes you your own person. It's what makes all these classmates that I will never meet again their own people. Granted, our identities brought us together in this one online class, and that's awesome. But if we took that all away, what are we? If not just balls of flesh that have nothing individual and interesting about them. And identity is what makes art individual and interesting. And I don't just mean a painting on a wall. I mean sculptures, books, music, poems, even facial expressions can be art. If you take away identity, you take away what makes art, what makes a book interesting to read, what makes a song appealing and fun to listen to, what makes a sculpture, make you take a second glance. If we take identity is what makes art art, in my opinion. It is what makes art individual and interesting and appealing, or not appealing. Because sometimes I like art that I think is hideous because it's hideous. And identity is what gives us that ability to look at something new and digest it and break down all of its components to try and understand it. So that's how I feel identity is positive. And to wrap this all up, I feel like Zora Neale Hurston is able to take identity to make her art, her writing, her own, and not what you expect to come out of, just a category that says African American female author. She uses her identity as Zora Neale Hurston, an African American woman who came from a poor economic upbringing, to become herself and to write what she feels, what she thinks, who she is. Thank you.